Come join me in my shop and we're going to build this aspen leaf birdhouse together step by step. All right, so for this job today, what you're going to need is you're going to need something to cut with. I use my miter saw. You're going to need maybe a bandsaw, potentially a jigsaw. You can get away with just a circular handsaw. Table saw will do just fine too. There's a number of ways you can cut all these pieces. This one is pretty simple for the actual shape of the birdhouse. Then you're going to need something to carve with. I like my Dremel for this one. Just makes short work of it. The grinder might get a little bit big, but I do use it during one section. And something to sand with. All right, and here's your cut list. Again, fairly simple. You're going to give me two 12-inch long pieces, full width of your 5.5-inch wide fence picket. You're going to give me one 8-inch piece, that's for one side of your roof. You're going to give me another 7.5-inch piece for the other side of the roof, but we're going to put an angle at the top of this one, not at the bottom part, and we're basically going to be setting our miter saw to a 30-degree angle to make this cut to overlap the roof. Then you're going to give me about 20 pieces that are 3 inches long, that are about 1.25 inches wide, with a bevel on at least one end, potentially two, but we'll go over that a little bit more in detail. And if you want it written down, here's your cut list. Now for the roof, what you're going to do is you're going to set your miter saw to 30 degrees, right? And we're going to bevel the top on one side here. And then from the top of it, I'm going to measure down 8 inches. And then again, I'm going to go back to 30 degrees, make a beveled cut, and then measure 7.5 off of this one. And the way this is going to sit on the birdhouse is just like this, right? This gets rid of a crazy miter cut on the very top of the birdhouse to prevent leaking, and just makes it easy. So now for this next cut here, to get those thin 3-inch by 1.25 inches or so pieces, I just like to take my remaining piece. I like to do this on my bandsaw, but you can totally do this on a table saw just as easily, and set this to about, 10 degrees, okay? So then set your fence up to cut it about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches off the blade approximately. This doesn't have to be perfect because we're actually going to leave a gap in between where the roof sits to leave room for venting, and everybody's is going to be different, right? You might take 8 pieces to make the curve on the side that you were making the side walls here curved with the side of the birdhouse. So everybody's going to be different. Just make it 1 inch, make it 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, whatever. I just like to do the beveled edge on one side for this birdhouse because that's going to give it enough curve. You don't need both sides of this beveled. All right, so I've ended up with one strip beveled on one side, flat on the other. I've got another one, the same, which is the other side of the fence picket. Then I end up with these two in the middle, which, if you do build a lot of the birdhouses that I build, keep these things around. So these are beveled on both ends, and one's wider than the other, but that's totally fine. Like, rip a bunch of these down into 3-inch sections and keep the other ones aside, because I use these a lot for 6-inch segments for roofs and stuff like that to just make fun curves with. So I have a ton of these just laying around, and they come in super duper handy. Back at the miter saw, I like to set a stop here so that way every piece is exactly the same, and just cut a bunch of them, something like 20 of them. All right, so now we're going to take one of our 12-inch boards, and we need to cut a fairly extreme angle here. 60 degrees, which miter saws don't go to 60 degrees, at least mine doesn't. And so you could potentially do this with a table saw. If you're not comfortable making this cut, just make the marks like I'm going to tell you to, and you could do it with a jigsaw. But I'm going to show you how I do it with my miter saw. So, you've seen the videos out there of making extreme angle cuts where you put a 45, but that only gets you an extreme angle cut from one side of the board to the other. It doesn't give you a point at the top. So what I do is I set up, it's kind of like a jig, right? It's just a square piece of plywood here that I then fastened to my workbench and to the miter saw, so that way I know this is going to be a clean cut here, which is, what we're going to put the board up against, as you'll see in a second. Take your 5.5 inch wide piece and make a mark in the middle, and so my plywood jig here is lined up so that way this cut is exactly at my middle mark here. And so now all you need to do is flip the board over, and that's where this longer piece comes in handy. And then what I would say is go ahead and clamp down this piece here, because once you make the cut, you're not going to have anything sitting against the back end of the miter saw fence that's built in. So clamp this other part down so nothing goes flinging at you. All right. And there you have it. And if you don't want to make that cut, all you need to do is measure from the bottom of your board to about 7 1/4. Okay? Then make a mark on the side, make a mark on the other side, draw a straight line to the middle, and you can set up some type of jig, freehand it, use a handsaw, whatever you want to do, bandsaw, make that cut just as cleanly as possible. It's totally fine. The birds aren't going to complain, I promise. And then go ahead and do that with the back side as well, the other 12-inch piece that you have, so that way front and the back are going to line up. And at this point in your project, what you should have is you should have two 12-inch pieces with a point at the top. You should have an 8-inch and a 7.5-inch piece with 30-degree beveled cuts at the top. And then you should have a bunch of 1 1/4, 1.5 inch, 1-inch pieces with bevel on one side. So what we're going to do now is we're going to mark a half circle kind of line here, quarter circle, to kind of make the shape of the leaf. So to start with, mark from the bottom about a 1/2 inch or so, and right into the middle, 2 3/4, because this is going to be the little tail part. Now you can totally freehand this. I like to use the bow that I've made here. If you don't know what it is, it's a rip down small piece of like exterior trim, and then I put this string in it with a little slot at the edge of it, so I can kind of make different angled curves here. And what you want to do is you actually want to draw this curve above this angle, okay? Because we want it to go all the way up and kind of have this circular shape before the roof starts. So go to about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch above that angle on both sides, and that's where our curve's actually going to originate. Okay, and I like this to be rather curvy here. So you can just freehand this too if you want, folks, because drawing a curve on wood, it doesn't always look organic when you're using something that, is shaped kind of perfectly. So feel free, experiment with this. Play around until you get the curve looking how you want it to. So there is mine and what that looks like. And then what I do at the bottom here is I just I cut this curve early and I kind of make a tail. Okay. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I like to. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the two pieces here and I'm going to nail them together. Then I'm going to head over to my bandsaw. You can do it with a jigsaw, whatever you want, and just make this cut. And there you go. There you have your shape. All right, so go ahead and take these two pieces apart, get your brad nails out of there. Now, we're going to kind of do something similar here, except we're going to do it with the roof pieces. So I got both of them here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to brad nail them together. And then at the bottom of this, I'm just going to freehand some waves here, okay? And for this, I want to make sure that I'm not starting the waves more than about 2 inches up from the bottom. So I'm going to make a mark there. That's as high as I can have these waves going. All right. So I just got a little wavy gravy going there. I'm going to go back to the bandsaw, cut cut this out, and this is going to be the bottom of our roof. Voila. All right, now so for this next part, I've done this both ways. You could either start by shaping the face of it first into the leaf and then put it together, or you can put it together first and then shape it. I like this second way that I'm going to show you how to do it because, nails and stuff, once you round out the edges a bit, getting the brad nails into the right spot can be a little bit tricky sometimes. First off, I'm going to go ahead and put the hole in the front. I'm going to use 1.25" drill bit on this. You can use 1 inch, maybe up to 1.5 inches. Again, in the link in the description below, I've got that chart where you can kind of see what different size holes are for different size birds. So for this front hole, I'm going to mark this about 7.5 inches from the bottom, right, and to the middle here. All right, now at this point, what I like to do is just kind of line it up a little bit, right? Make sure you got the front and the back piece together. And then I like to take the roof here and just kind of line it up. Make sure, first of all, that everything's actually going to fit together, that my angles are right, that it didn't screw up, because I don't know about you guys, but I have never screwed up a miter cut angle in my life. I've never measured and cut it long and then cut it 14 times until I get to the right length, ever. So at this point, what we're seeing is where the roof lines up here, kind of on the underside. And then what I like to do is I like to mark where the gap starts for the sides. And the reason I like to do that is because when we build out the sides, I like to leave a little bit of a gap so that way it vents. Why? Because it seems that my audience is so worried about making sure the birds have proper venting, which is oh so sweet. All right, so I got both of those sides marked, and then the fun part for you jigsaw puzzlers out there. That's where we're going to come, and we're going to start taking our pieces, and we're going to start lining things up. So mark the back side boards to where those roofs kind of go to. Take my back end board here, and in comes small pieces. So for this, I'm just going to start to put these in a way that makes this curve. And you'll be surprised how many times you might have to go flat end to flat end. But I'll tell you how mine lines up, and maybe yours will line up similarly. All right, so on this first side, what I did was I took the beveled edge, okay, and I started that at the very bottom here, and it actually kind of, it sets the bottom to where it's kind of lining up on the other side. Let me see if I can show you here. Okay, so this one is actually going to be the edge of the other side as it starts, okay? So that's how I started it. And then, so it went beveled edge, flat edge, beveled, flat, all the way up. Now, what's going on this side is that from the place where my marking is, right, there's the mark of where my roof starts. So that makes about 1/2 inch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the roof just to see, like, okay, is that too much of a gap? Do I actually need another small piece there? Or is that the perfect size gap? Because I am perfect at making these. You know what? With how this goes, that is a perfect size gap, for crying out loud. Now, what's going to probably happen on the other side, my guess, is that this is actually going to end too long because we started here. So we're actually going to start this wall a little bit higher. So I might have to go in and trim down one of these pieces to get it to work right. But I'm going to put mine together and see where yours lines up. You might have to do the same thing. I'll let you know how mine goes. What I'm going to start doing is I'm going to move this entire block to the side. Son of a gun. I was just getting ready to say, make sure you keep it all exactly lined up, because you'll never line it up the same way twice. Gosh darn it. Okay, I think I got it. This one's easy. Sometimes I have to go beveled, flat, beveled. This one turned out pretty darn good. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to glue on the bottom, then glue on the sides as I work my way up. A couple of brad nails in each one should hold it just fine. And yes, I use Tite Bond 3 glue. It's their exterior waterproof glue. All right, first side is done here, and now I'm going to go through and line up the other side. Let's see how it goes. All right, and as I thought, this top piece is a little bit too close. So what I'm just going to do is bandsaw it real quick, and I'm going to take off, about half an inch off of one of these blocks. All right, and viola. It's a little bit under where that is, so it leaves some nice venting for the birds. Now, just gonna glue it in and brad nail them together. All right, there we go. We got the sidewalls on. And now, before I give this a quick sanding, what I'm gonna do is I am going to put the front on here. So we're just gonna line this up. And what I like to do to make sure that it's lined up as good as possible is take your roof pieces and line those up with the front and the back, and that'll kind of help give a good indication as to where the front should be. So the back is lined up perfectly, and there we go. So now I'm going to do that again, except this time I'm going to have these pieces glued. You're going to have to kind of manipulate these pieces into place a little bit. They're not going to line up perfectly. Situate that on there again loosely. Pinch the roof onto the back tightly because that's the one that's perfect, and then arrange your front piece until it slides in to the roof well. And then all you do, get rid of the roof pieces and tack down the front. All right, and there you go. Front and back should be on. Now at this point, I am actually going to give it a sanding because what you're going to notice is on the sides, they don't line up perfectly. You're going to kind of have some overhang, in certain sections, and that's what this sand job is for here, is to kind of smooth everything out on the sides. And we want to do this before we get the roof on because the roof's actually going to cover parts of this, and it's just a lot easier. So for this, 80 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander works just fine. Make short work of it. This is just a couple minutes, guys. All right, and there we go. It's rounded out the sides nicely and just made that smooth. I didn't do a whole ton on the front because we're going to start shaping this now, so we're going to take most of the material off anyways, but just made the sides nice and smooth and easy, rounded out the back just a little bit. So now what I want you to do in the front is I just want you to mark a center line down the middle. So take whatever straight edge you have and mark from the middle on the top to the middle on the bottom and draw your line, okay? And then this next part is where you can get kind of creative, okay? So I just came in here and I drew a bunch of little swooshy lines, just a handful of them, 5, 6 of them on each side, and just kind of made them even. And then you can even go even further. This is your birdhouse. This is your leaf. So you can make some more detailed ones if you wanted to. This one I'm just going to keep simple for you guys. An experiment, right? And then this middle part, so here's what's going to happen, is this middle part is going to be raised. So we're actually going to take, I'm going to start with my grinder, but you can take your Dremel, hand chisels, whatever you want, and I'm going to grind out next to it here on both sides. So the middle is going to kind of be a raised vein, okay? And then on these going out, I'm going to use my Dremel and just kind of make deep channels going all the way through. And on my Dremel here, this is just a sanding wheel that I have. It does a really good job. Cedar is soft, remember. And again, link in the description for pretty much everything I use. Whew. All right. Always a good time with the grinder. So you can see, I shaped it quite a bit, right? I've rounded out the edges pretty well. I made deep grooves here, and we're talking I maybe went through about 50% of the board for these first two deep grooves, and I just kind of rounded everything out just a little bit. Not as much on the top, right? That's where the roof is going to go, but you just kind of keep going, keep doing stuff and keep removing material until it gets to a nice, rounded, fun shape. Now at this point, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to recess these nails even more on the front here so they don't get in the way. And I don't want to do them after, I do the other, finer lines through it. Now, remember those lines that I drew up front? Yeah, they're gone. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of redraw them here. All right, now for this part, I like to use my Dremel, and I got a burring tool on here. Cutsall, I think, makes this one. Link in the description. Now, could you do this next part with the grinder? Probably if you're a barbarian. All right, and there you have the simple grooves cut out of it. Now at this point, what I like to do that gets in there really nicely is take this sander to it. So what this is just sandpaper cut into squares and put on a Dremel tool. Right? You're not going to get a whole lot of use out of it, maybe about 10-15 minutes total because it wears down. But man, it gets in those grooves pretty darn nicely. All right, there you go. Sanded down. It just gets in those grooves. That burring tool, definitely takes some gouges out of things and leaves a rough finish there. Then I'm just going to go back through and kind of pound any nails in a little bit more that, kind of lined up with where the grooves went. Now we're ready to put the roof on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out just a couple of blocks here on the underside that are same thickness as a birdhouse. And then I am going to take our roof here and line it up so it's going to sit like this. So you have this space in the back, right? That's why we place the blocks on the table here. And then this one for clean out access. We're going to make this one just removable from the lid here, right? We're going to have some screws in the top, kind of unavoidable with this style, without making some fancy door on the back, but still you have to make it really big to actually make it a valid clean out. So in this one, I just like to keep the roof with something that we can remove. And the one that we're going to glue and nail into piece is going to be the longer edged one, okay? So all you're going to do is glue that side of the roof part. Going to line it up again, punch a few brad nails in. Once you have that side of the roof installed, secured, make sure you glue this part well. What you're going to do on the other part of the roof is you're going to mark down 3 inches from the top, right? We're just making this even for the screw holes on both sides here. And then on what will be the front part of your roof, you want to mark it. On mine, it's 3/4, right, is where the center of my screw needs to be. And the back is going to be just at about 1 inch or so, okay? So measure where the center of your front and back of the birdhouse sit here, from each side, and then make sure that you're screwing into what will be the middle of the birdhouse. There you go. Now on this one, I would actually love to hear from you guys. If you think you have a better way to do a clean out on this birdhouse, I would love to know, and I will try it. I've done other ones where I've kind of had hinges on the top, and some weird little clasp, but yeah, I don't know, they just felt a little rinkety. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Drop your comment in the below, and I'll see if I can make it better. But wait, there's more, because we're not done yet. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to make shingles in the roof here. Again, I like to use my grinder. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw some wavy lines, a couple of them, let's say 3 on this side, right? Doesn't have to be perfect whatsoever. And I'm going to make a few on the other side. These have to line up with where the screws aren't going to be. So maybe I just do 2 over here. Okay. And then I'm going to grinder these out. And then we're going to put some vertical slats in here too. Make it look like shingles. Whew. All right. So now we've got some shingles on the roof. I'm going to hit it with a sand job, kind of smooth out all these little bit sharp edges here. And yeah, we're going to get on to the fun part. Now, before we do the wood filler, what I'm going to do is just come up here and kind of in the top center, I'm going to drill about 5/8 inch size hole in the top and the bottom. And this is going to be for ventilation and for drainage, okay? Just in case water gets in there. And I'm just drilling that not quite all the way to the bottom, but right above where these boards would go. That way, in case a bunch of water does get in here during a crazy storm, it's got somewhere to go. And now, time for wood filler. This is the stuff that I use. Works pretty well with the cedar. And again, link in the description. All right, now we got one more final little sand here before my favorite part. Tung oil time. Oh, this stuff is great. You know, if you're putting any finishes on at all, which you don't have to, right? Cedar, yes, is mold resistant, is insect resistant. Done a lot of research on that over the weekend based on another commenter that was chiming in about it. And, you know, the tung oil, birds are not resistant to, right? There's no real curing time needed or anything. There's no like chemical like fumes that they're, you know, not going to like, but we're not doing anything to the inside anyways. But I just love the protection it adds, plus just how it makes it look. What are you guys doing? Then I'm just going to finish it off with a couple of eye hooks at the top. And again, all the chains, hooks, tung oil, everything like that. There's links in the description below. There we have it. All prettied up. I think we're going to call this the aspen leaf, right? You can make a bunch of different designs as far as the leaf that's on front. You know, you don't have to take the sides to it directly. You can make a broader leaf, kind of be creative with it. Again, this is your art form, this is your project, make it your own. You know, and craft fairs, depending on how kind of fancied up I make these, you know, with either doing some copper work up front for squirrel protectors and, you know, just going a little bit heavier on the carving and stuff like that. You know, 50 to 75 bucks, you know, on the upper end is kind of what I'd charge for these, but the cost on them is so absolutely low. If you're going to start using good woods on them, right, maples or ash or anything like that, like, you got to be talking pretty much $100 or more just to make any of this worth any amount of time whatsoever. Now, if carving isn't exactly your thing, like, that's why I put together this video. This is one of my favorite designs of birdhouses that I do.